Yo, what's good, everybody? It is your boy, Golden Falls, Golden What If, whatever you want to call me. I am back. It's a brand new Deku What If. What if Deku had a Pokemon Quirk? I'm going to give you guys a quick little thing. I want to say this before it even begins. It's not necessarily he's a Pokemon trainer. He has a Pokemon Quirk. With that said, though, I don't want to spoil too much of what's going to happen. Everybody does Pokemon Trainer Deku. A lot of people have, and a lot of people will. So I want to do something a little different. And that's exactly what you're going to see here and now. With that said, I hope y'all enjoy. If you do, as always, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. Blow up the video if you want to see more. I mean, obviously, I see analytics, so make sure to blow up the video. And yeah, that's all I got to say. And let's get right into the what if. Let's get it. Izuku Midoriya is born just like a normal child. But as he grows up from the ages of 1, 2, 3, and 4, he idolizes the one and only All Might. But while growing up, he's seen as normal, simple, as if he's just some normal kid. And for the most part, that is true. Other than the fact that he's an absolute addict in terms of heroes, he's a pretty much normal kid. He's kind of teased here and there for the things he likes, the things he says. But at the end of the day, he's just a kid being a kid. But with all that said, Izuku wants to be like the one and only All Might. All Might is a massive hero, and if not just massive, he is the #1 hero. All Might is the one and only, the one that is idolized throughout the entirety of Japan, and Izuku wants to be just like him. Because at the end of the day, if he's like him, he could be the greatest hero alive. But at the very, very, very least, he wants to at least be a hero that can be idolized. Someone that could be more or less seen as a symbol of hope, a symbol of peace. And the cool part is Izuku would actually get this chance, because he would eventually learn, actually not by a doctor, but on his own, that he has some sort of transformation quirk. Because out of nowhere, when he was just a little kid, he was playing Pokemon, watching it, and he was a huge fan. But what he didn't know is that his transformation quirk would lead to a link between him and Pokemon itself. And it's not the way you think it would be. Izuku would gain this Pokemon quirk based off the fact that he is obsessed with Pokemon and would be a big fan of it, leading his transformation quirk to actually spark transformations between one of his favorite Pokemon, or his very favorite Pokemon, well, Lucario. He would link with Lucario in an odd way. Seemingly, it's kind of interesting the way it would actually work out. It seems that the connection that he has emotionally, at least in terms of excitement, linked him with his so-called Lucario. And this would be cool and all, but when he would out of nowhere transfer into a Riolu, this little dog looking like monster or kind of like a Pokemon, his mother would freak out, thinking that this is insane, actually taking a baseball bat and trying to hit him with it. But eventually he would get the words out, and his mother would realize that this is her son, and this is his quirk. She would be completely shocked. How is this even possible? I mean, normally transformation quirks and stuff like this, it would be from the very beginning when they're born. And that's nothing like his father's or her quirk. They would immediately go to, well, the doctors. And the doctor wouldn't know much about this type of quirk. All he knows is that it is a transformation quirk, giving them as much information on transformation quirks as possible, and hypothesizes himself that maybe his love for these little pocket monsters led him to be like this. Maybe it's kind of a connection with his personality. Maybe it's his love for kind of the little Pokemon that he enjoys playing games with so much. Maybe it's his connection because he watches TV and the radio waves have some sort of connection with it, and that it made it spark his quirk. He has no clue, and really all they can do is hypothesize. But at the same time, he tells her not to worry, because his quirk shouldn't be permanent. What it seems like it is literally a transformation quirk, so it's not necessarily a mutation. It's not something that is permanent, but it does have permanent effects. And she asks what he means by that, and he basically says that when he transforms, it's no longer necessarily his quirk. Yes, it is a transformation quirk, but when he embodies that other thing, there is no way to easily shift him out of it. He has to do it on command and under his own control, in which is a weird explanation. And she asks how he even knows that, and he would say that he's seen some instances of transformation quirks like that, so they can assume that it's very similar. In which, of course, Inko would ask him to think about turning back into normal, and he would think hard and really hard, and eventually he would change back to the little version of Izuku. Yes, this would be kind of crazy, but it did kind of fit the whole his height and stuff like that. So maybe him being a little kid makes it so that he's a smaller version of that Pokemon, in which he would bring up that a Riolu is actually the pre-evolution or the baby version of a Lucario, and that he evolves based on happiness. So it wouldn't really make sense for a Riolu just to level up based on his age, in which that is true to a certain extent, but even the doctor says that, I mean, that's how that's how it works in the game. I just had a mini stroke, sorry about that. That's how it works in the game. So it doesn't mean that's gonna how it's going to work in real life as well. So they keep this in mind as they head back home, and Izuku begins to kind of just try to figure out what his quirk is all about. But the only issue is that when he goes to school and he begins to talk to all these people, they actually think that he's kind of a freak. It's kind of sketchy and weird, and I mean, like, come on, it's some weird ass, like, more or less transforming type of thing. Nobody's really a big fan of it. Let's just say that. Everybody kind of says that it kind of makes him creepy and it kind of makes him weird. And he was already nerdy enough, and now he could change into like this little monster. I mean, come on, that's just odd. A couple of them think it's kind of cool, but they refuse to kind of say it because, you know, Bakugo's so popular, and Bakugo's kind of drives this whole bullying fest. But even with that said, well, they kind of keep it hidden, but they think being a Pokemon is kind of sick. Everybody would love to be a Pokemon, at least the nerds. And frankly, I would be in that line as well. I mean, he wants to be a Pokemon, or other people would love to transform in a Pokemon, and they think that it's so cool that he is one, but they just won't say it. Of course, though, this would limit his happiness, and as he grows up, he would figure out that it's not age that correlates with his evolution into Lucario, it's definitely happiness, because he's not the happiest kid in the world. Yes, he is pretty excitable, but deep down inside, he's not super happy because he just doesn't have that many friends. And as they approach the end of middle school, Izuku would still feel that way. He would still only be a Riolu, in which everyone kind of makes fun of the idea that he's still this little tiny creature and it can't even really do anything. But at the same time, Izuku just hasn't tried that hard to work with his Pokemon. He knows how strong a Riolu really is. I mean, like, if you put it into perspective, a Riolu is pretty damn strong, especially in a regular world. And yes, this is a quirk world, but even in this world, he's probably more powerful than some heroes out there. I mean, he's genuinely probably stronger than some heroes. But at the same time, he wouldn't know that because he hasn't really had the chance to work out, train, increase his strength. But after a while, and after sitting through this little bit of a lecture from his middle school teacher, he would hear the idea that he's going to UA, and so is Bakugo. Bakugo would get so mad and basically slam his hand with an explosion on his desk, telling him to not even give it a shot, that he's just going to lose, he's going to die and get hurt. At the end of the day, that's what's going to happen, and he's just useless anyways. In which Izuku would learn to just ignore this, at least to a certain extent. But he would tell Bakugo that he's still going to give it a try, and that if he's not afraid of Izuku stealing his spotlight, then who cares, right? That if he thinks that Izuku's that useless, then he'll just go crash and burn anyways in the entrance exam. In which Bakugo kind of tells him to shut his mouth and eventually would sit down. The teacher would tell them to stop basically bickering with each other and tell them to get along, because eventually they're going to be heroes alongside each other, and some of them will be citizens alongside the heroes. But after some minor just explaining and stuff like that, Izuku would eventually be allowed to go home. But when he's allowed to go home, he would be stopped relatively quickly by Bakugo, who's actually straight up ready to kind of throw his journal off the roof, and also tells him to basically kill himself, which is absolutely horrible thing to say, and tells Izuku that, well, he'd be better off just jumping off the building and hoping that he gets a quirk and a better one in his next life. Izuku would just ignore him, as he'd be very frustrated, and he would just leave. And of course, he would go and retrieve his notebook that is all messed up. But of course, he can't really do much about it. So he just takes the notebook, tries to dry it off, and just heads home. When he's heading home, though, he goes a different direction, thinking that he should just work on some of his notes and work on some ideas. And he begins to continue researching and kind of writing down different things that a Lucario can do, but also what a Riolu can do, what moves and what things like that. And he does bring up the fact that Riolu is kind of like a spiritual fighting type Pokemon. Yes, he's not part psychic type, but some of his attacks, like Aura Sphere and stuff like that, deal with something that is known as ki, or at least some inner power within somebody. So it is something that he's thought about himself, and maybe he can utilize that inner power that is dormant within him. But I mean, he's got no chance to even try that. His training, or his quote-unquote training that he does, isn't really pushing himself to the limit, and frankly can't really do much about that, because he's not going to throw himself into harm's way for no reason. But what he doesn't know is that a situation is about to happen to him now. Walking under a bridge, eventually he'd hear the rumblings of something underneath, and right when he hears it, he immediately would turn around, and those rumblings would turn into a absolute crazed villain, the sludge villain, bursting out of a manhole cover, charging at Izuku, telling him that he needs his body. Izuku would panic, transforming into his Riolu form as he tries to run away. And he's obviously a good bit faster than the sludge villain, but he's scared. He thinks the sludge villain is going to catch up to him. And sludge villain even remarks that that's a cool quirk. He could even disguise himself if he utilizes the quirk that All Might will never know. And as he says this, Izuku begins thinking, All Might, what would All Might do? He would turn, standing his ground in his small Riolu form, and he would clench his fist as hard as possible as he throws a right hand. But as he does, it looks like this orb and this aura begin to just spark off of him as he immediately uses an aura sphere, and it absolutely blasts the sludge villain into the roof and slams him everywhere, scattering him to little tiny pieces. All Might would then follow up and come out of the manhole cover, and Izuku would see him, and he would be extremely happy, thinking that this is awesome. As All Might approaches him, he asks him if he did this, and Izuku would change back into his normal form, in which All Might says that's a hell of a quirk he has there. That's pretty interesting. He's never thought of anything like that. Like, that's absolutely amazing. If he has a quirk like that, he'll become an extremely powerful hero. And if he's able to destroy the sludge villain as easily as he did, I mean, he's probably stronger than some heroes now. In which, hearing this from All Might, Izuku would begin glowing, in which All Might would be confused as he changes back into his Riolu form, but eventually that glow would then cover him entirely, lighting up the entirety of the underneath of the bridge. And as it lights it all up, Izuku would appear once again as a seemingly taller version of the Riolu. And obviously Izuku knows that Lucario is a steel fighting type, so this is pretty insane, making it so that his durability is quite a bit more, but at the same time, the steel typing might actually give him crazy new moves. He begins to think about this, and he begins to write in his journal super quick. And then he thinks, wait, this is the first time he's ever been extremely happy, and he finally evolved. So his hypothesis, his idea is correct. The idea that his happiness makes him evolve, he was right. All Might stands there and grabs his book as he signs it, and he says that it looks like the kid has transcended his powers already. It's really impressive. In such a short amount of time, it seems, he's already so much stronger. He can just tell by the way he holds himself. He can tell by the way this monster is, or this Pokemon, but he doesn't know it's a Pokemon. He can tell that it must be powerful. In which Izuku thanks him and says yes, he thinks that All Might has helped him with a breakthrough, in which All Might says that he's glad that he was able to help even though he doesn't necessarily know what he did. But with all that said, All Might says that he hopes to see him at UA High School and that he's considering actually taking on a bit of a student. Maybe he can train Izuku in the 10-month span to actually going to UA. Izuku thinks this is a fantastic idea. He hasn't had proper training, so this will definitely put him in a position to utilize that training. All Might gives him a thumbs up and jumps off with the sludge villain after they clean everything up, and he tells the kid to meet him at Dagoba Beach. After some time would pass, Izuku would do just that, obviously telling his mother what happened and how the Riolu evolved, or how he evolved? Something like that, in which he shows her that it's a Lucario, and she compliments that the Lucario is so tall that it's actually insane, and she can tell that he's extremely powerful. In which Izuku agrees as he picks up the couch with relative ease, literally with one hand. She actually wonders that maybe he can actually transform into other Pokemon as well, and Izuku thinks that this could be true, but he wonders how he's supposed to do that, in which she says that everything that they've heard is all based on emotion, or maybe it's based off of his love for a certain Pokemon, or maybe it's just the connection or the similarities he has with a Riolu, in which he thinks to himself that this is pretty interesting ideas, but of course he doesn't really know at this moment, so he's not going to like try to force himself into trying to become Arceus or anything like that. Probably kill him somehow, or maybe it'll backfire and he'll never be able to use his Lucario form ever again. He has no clue, but he tells his mother that this is a good idea to kind of read up on and try things out when it's in a safe environment. And of course, she thinks that's a great idea too. She likes how safe he's trying to be and also how calculated he is, in which he's always been that way, but now it's even showing through even more. With all that said though, he says that he needs to go meet the one and only All Might at Dagoba Beach because he's actually going to get training from him, in which that sounds great to Izuku's mom or Inko, and he would eventually arrive. When he arrives, he sees All Might in his All Might form, but then eventually it would deplete. All Might tells him that what he saw in him is something that he saw, or that he's only seen in himself a long time ago, or at least according to his former master. And yes, this is All Might still. He explains to him that unfortunately his power is just not what it used to be. It's a slightly depleted, but he doesn't bring up anything else. He doesn't bring up that he was like severely injured or that he can pass on the quirk. He just wants to see what the kid is made of, especially during this time of training, in which this is a great idea. Izuku thinks that this is a pretty fair assessment of what's going on, and that he wants to see what he's capable of. So he tells Izuku, transform back into Lucario, or his other form, and start cleaning up the beach. There's a ton of heavy stuff, so maybe he should go clean it up and just try to more or less get a workout out of it. So Izuku does just that, in which it actually ups his attack stat and also his speed stat depending on how he utilizes his muscles. This is a form of more or less EV training. If he focuses on how fast he's running and how fast he can get to certain places, it ups his chances of basically having EVs leaning towards speed. And with the whole strength thing, his attack power, he gets it based off of just flat out the more or less the raw strength of having to pick up a bunch of stuff, like a bunch of refrigerators and stuff like that. Over the course of the next couple weeks, he would easily clean up the beach, and it was more beautiful than anybody could possibly imagine. He would continue running sprints up and down the beach, and even going for swims, thinking that this will help with his endurance massively. And he realizes that he can kind of stay in this form for long periods of time, and it even affects his human-like form, because when he transforms back, it's like a cheat code to getting fit. Because when he transforms back completely, he has a six-pack, he's shredded, and he's actually just like absolutely in insane fitness. Of course, it's not the level of Lucario, because Lucario is a crazy monster of a being. But for a human, I mean, his strength, his endurance, his speed is so much better than anybody else's, and it's all because of the fact that he's running, jumping, training, and all of that in his Lucario form, in which after months and months and months of training, well, let's just say All Might could tell that this kid is strong and very strong, but at the same time he's very noble. He thinks the world of All Might, but also basically believes in certain ideals, and the ideals that he wants to follow in terms of making sure everyone is safe, and that it matters, like every single life matters, and he truly believes these things, and All Might can tell. So All Might tells him something about 75, maybe 80% into the training sessions, that he says that his quirk is an interesting one, and he trusts Izuku to keep this a secret, because this is very serious, explaining what One for All is, and explaining what his quirk is all about. He also tells Izuku that he could pass on this quirk, in which Izuku hears this and thinks that this is insane, this is amazing, and he asks him if he's considering passing it on to him, in which All Might nods his head, saying that that's definitely the case. He knows that Izuku has a powerful quirk, but for some reason there's something within Izuku that is even further, that they can't necessarily untap without, well, pushing him even further beyond what he is now, in which Izuku's kind of confused about, but All Might explains that this quirk, One for All, might help him get to the next level, a level that he can't believe, and he believes that this form of him, the Lucario form of him, durability wise and maybe other transformations, will be able to withstand One for All so easily that his body should be in a really good condition to utilize it, in which Izuku tells him that, I mean, he'll never turn down an opportunity to be like All Might, but All Might says that he doesn't want him to necessarily be like him, not a copy and clone, but he wants him to be better. He wants him to realize and utilize the brain he has, the brain that really All Might doesn't have, and he even admits it himself that Izuku is extremely smart, very tactical, so he needs to utilize that brain that basically he doesn't have, and utilize it for the greater good of everyone else. It's kind of like he's a combination of All Might and someone else as well, who he doesn't really reference. He just calls the guy who he's referencing by the name of David Shield his best friend, or one of his best friends. But he also says that he also is very similar to one of Sir Night-Eye, his former sidekick, in which Izuku is shocked to hear this, because he doesn't think he's really anything like Sir Night-Eye, but All Might tells him that he's more like Sir Night-Eye in the way of his tactical thinking, that he wants to think things through before he, does anything stupid, which is a great quality to have 100% of the time. He really believes that Izuku can be an amazing, amazing hero, and that's just the fact of the matter. So the decision is made that with a little bit of time left, he is going to transfer One for All to Izuku. Izuku is excited eventually, until All Might says he has to eat his hair, which he thinks is kind of weird. Like, why do I have to eat your hair? And he explains that, I mean, it could either be hair or blood, but he has to somehow consume his DNA, in which Izuku still finds weird, but he eats the hair and swallows it. But for days, maybe even weeks, there is really no difference, in which All Might asks if he is 100% in it, in terms of like he really wants to be the successor, in which Izuku says yes, 100%, And he asks All Might if he's 100% okay with him being the successor. And of course All Might is. I mean, everything has to be completely and utterly just on both sides, having full willingness to do this. But for some reason, there's no sign of it even occurring. No sign of One for All at all, and no sign at all. So they continue just training. And eventually it would be time for the entrance exam, in which Izuku is extremely excited for. But at the same time, he's a little worried because he hasn't seen the appearance of One for All, but he hopes that eventually it will arrive. It just maybe will arrive in its own special way. Izuku would arrive at the entrance exam hall and more or less enter the auditorium. When he enters the auditorium, he listens to President Mike spew off about what's going to happen in terms of the written portion of the exam. And after the written portion of the exam is completely over, he then listens to President Mike explain the robots. President Mike would explain that the robots, more or less the way they work, is they are based on a point system. 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, stuff like that. And there also is a 0-point robot. And this robot obviously is worth 0 points. And he tells them all that it's best to just avoid them. He thinks that makes sense, but after it all is said and done, they all get out toward the gates and line up, in which Izuku would be right by someone that he actually saw coming in, and someone he kind of avoided at that moment when he saw her. And that would be, well, Ochako Uraraka. But he would kind of just nervously just laugh it off and kind of just say that, oh yeah, like he wishes her good luck too. He didn't fall in this scenario, but he did bump into her. And her being her friendly self did say hello. But after that is all said and done, the gates would swing open, and as they swing open, Izuku would transform, and everybody would look to their side and see this monster. But some of the people that are pretty into like gaming and just TV shows or anime would see that that's a Lucario. That's a freaking Pokemon. And they're kind of shocked to see this. How does that even make sense? How is he doing that? But he would race off through the gates, and he would be so fast, nobody would be able to keep up. He is so quick and extremely fast that he immediately is like jumping through the robots, destroying them. One punch after one punch. He's absolutely obliterating the robots. Everybody watches in awe, but they realize that they need to get on board now because he might just steal all the points. So they do just that. Everybody follows suit, and Izuku continues destroying robots, eventually leading to a point that he definitely feels that he easily could pass and get on to the next point of this exam. And he feels pretty good about it. He's happy that he was able to do all this. And frankly, he's happy he's having such success. And maybe he wouldn't have been able to do all this without All Might. And that's kind of the fact of the matter. All Might has really helped him a ton. And there's nothing wrong with saying that. He just knows that's the case. But he's still thinking to himself that he still hasn't been able to unlock One for All. How is All Might able to do that? Like, he doesn't understand how he's being restricted and why he's being restricted and what's even happening. But that chance to unlock One for All, to show what he's capable of, would soon come. Because, well, the 0-pointers would be immediately released, and Izuku would see people running away, but one girl laying there screaming and asking for help. Underneath metal, underneath all this rubble, Izuku could see her, and he sees her in that form, his Lucario form, and he immediately makes a bolt, a dash to get her out of there. He immediately would go for the rubble, smacking it all off and kind of dusting it off, and he tries to go pick her up, but as he goes to pick her up, he sees that the 0-point robot gained far more ground than he can possibly think. He thinks to himself that maybe he'd be able to get out of here if he picks her up and runs off. And there's a good chance that he could, but there's also a good chance that foot of the 0-point robot gets there before he can get away. So he stops, and he feels this power surge all throughout his body, and it responds to a need, not a want. And immediately this power would surge through him, and this orb of some sorts would surround Izuku and it would blast open. His appearance would change drastically. It would seem as if this aura around him would spark in a million different ways. But not just that, he looks so much different. So much different. It seems like Izuku not only has found his awakened power, but he's actually found a new form. This is Mega Lucario. He has red paws, it seems. His hair, or his hair on the back has red tips, and on top of that, the fur seems to be connected as if it's a suit of armor. On top of that, it looks like he has kind of like these face and fur tattoos that are all black, scaling all around his skin, and he looks like an absolute masterpiece. He looks like a monster. And Izuku would wind up and he would smash his fist into the robot, obliterating the 0 Point robot to pieces. Izuku Midoriya stands there and he completely is not saying a single word. He would turn back toward the girl as he would power down and he would go to his normal form. Seemingly it took a lot out of him, but he's not necessarily tired. Maybe he just need his Lucario form needs time to rest. He picks up the girl and helps her to the nurse, as well, of course, she would get medical attention. Izuku would leave as Recovery Girl would thank him, and the girl that he helped, Ochaku Araka, would thank him as well. He would wave them off and say that's the job of a hero, and if they want to be one, well, that should be second nature. He would leave as everyone watches in awe at this one guy. What did he do? Did he know he was going to do that? That power he just found, that was insane. It would blow all their minds. And some of the people that knew Pokemon knew exactly what that was, but they think that this guy, he's like a video game. Like, there's no way that he can transform into Pokemon, into literal fictional characters. But is that so far-fetched? Is that so far-fetched when, well, let's just say there's people with some weird quirks out there? Not really. Izuku Midoriya has stamped his ticket into UA, and soon that letter, that holographic message, that message from All Might himself would arrive, and he would tell him, "Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya, you are the #1 student in the entrance exam and the #1 student now in Class 1A. Welcome to UA High School." And that is where we're going to end off part 1 of What If Deku Had a Pokemon Quirk. In the next part, we'll go into his first day of UA High School and much more. But as always, if you enjoyed, show some love, leave a like, leave a sub, leave a comment down below. And if you want to see more ASAP, blow up the video and I'll get more to you as soon as possible. With that said, hope y'all enjoyed and I hope all y'all have an amazing day. Later.